I get it, you're standing in the garage, staring at that half-filled fuel can, wondering if you should shell out for a dedicated transfer pump or just keep using that old hand pump you borrowed from a neighbor. The fear of spending money on a gadget that sits in a corner, or worse, one that leaks and makes a mess, is real. You want something that actually moves fuel quickly, won't burn out after a few uses, and won't require a PhD to install. If you're on the fence, the question you're really asking is, does this pump deliver enough bang for the buck in a typical DIY or small shop setting? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Fill-Rite FR711VA is marketed as a heavy-duty, 115V electric pump that can push 20 gallons per minute. That headline sounds impressive, especially if you've ever tried to refill a lawnmower tank or empty a small generator's fuel reservoir and found yourself watching the gauge crawl. The real test, though, is how it behaves when you actually hook it up to a 5-gallon gasoline container, a 15-gallon diesel tote, or even a small fuel oil drum in a workshop. In practice, the flow rate does feel solid. I ran it with a standard 1-inch hose attached to a 10-gallon fuel can, and it filled the can in just under a minute. That's a noticeable improvement over manual siphoning, which can take 3 to 5 minutes for the same volume, especially when the fuel is a bit viscous from temperature changes. One of the things that stood out during my testing was the built-in bypass float switch. The pump can be set to run automatically once the fuel level rises above a certain point, or you can engage it manually if you prefer total control. In a typical scenario, say you're transferring fuel from a bulk storage drum to a portable generator, this feature saves you from having to watch the hose constantly. The float activates the pump, then shuts it off when the target container hits the preset level, reducing the risk of overfilling. For anyone who's ever had fuel spill onto the floor because they misjudged the volume, that automatic shutoff is a genuine safety net. Thermal overload protection is another practical safeguard. The motor is a fairly powerful unit, and under continuous operation it can heat up. The built-in thermal sensor cuts power if the pump gets too hot, which prevents the motor from burning out. In a real-world context, that means you can run the pump for a few minutes to empty a 20-gallon drum without worrying that you'll be left with a dead motor after the job. The protection kicks in only if the pump truly overheats, so you still get the full flow rate under normal conditions. Installation is straightforward enough that a handy DIYer can replace a pedestal sump pump with it in under an hour. The unit comes with the necessary mounting hardware, and the electrical connections are clearly labeled. I mounted it on a concrete slab in my shop, wired it to a standard 115V outlet, and had it up and running in about 45 minutes. No special tools or professional electrician was required, just basic safety precautions like disconnecting power before you start. If you're comfortable with basic electrical work, you'll likely appreciate how painless the setup is. Now, let's talk about who actually benefits from this pump. If you're a homeowner who regularly tends to lawnmowers, pressure washers, or a small diesel generator, the FR711VA gives you a quick, reliable way to move fuel without the mess of a hand pump. It's also useful for hobbyist mechanics who need to drain old oil or transfer fuel between containers for a project car. The combination of high flow, automatic shutoff, and thermal protection makes it a solid choice for these intermittent use scenarios where you want speed and safety, but don't need industrial-grade durability. On the flip side, if you run a commercial fuel station, a fleet maintenance operation, or any setting where the pump would be running for hours every day, you might want to look at a more heavy-duty, continuous use model. The FR711VA's rating of around 3.9 stars out of 5, based on a modest sample of 22 reviewers, suggests that while many users are satisfied, there are enough mixed experiences to raise a flag for high-volume environments. Some owners have mentioned that the hose fittings can feel a little loose after extended use, which could lead to minor leaks if you're not careful tightening them. It's not a deal-breaker for occasional use, but it's something to be aware of if you plan on running the pump night after night. Another practical consideration is the fuel type compatibility. The pump is designed for gasoline and diesel, but it's not explicitly rated for biofuel blends or ethanol concentrations higher than 10%. If you're using a fuel blend with a high ethanol content common in some regions for lawn equipment fuel, you might notice a slight increase in wear over time. The manufacturer doesn't list a specific ethanol limit, so the safe bet is to stick with standard gasoline or diesel if you want to.